On behalf of the board of the Greater Naga Chamber of Commerce, our incredible WIN Council, my colleagues, and our volunteers today, welcome. It is beautiful the view from here. I have to say it looks amazing. To seeing all of you interacting and having come together, it is truly a joyous moment for us. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, a commitment to share the land, its resources, and to care for it together in peace. As we gather today to celebrate International Women's Day, it is also an opportunity to reflect on the women who have long been stewards of this community, culture, and knowledge. Indigenous women are vital leaders, teachers, and protectors of our land, language, and tradition. We are so deeply grateful to all of them. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Acknowledging this reminds us that our communities, our opportunities, and the lives we build here are connected to the land and to the enduring presence and contributions of Indigenous people. May we carry forward the spirit of respect, generosity, and shared responsibility that gatherings like this invite us to reflect on. When I first saw this year's theme, Give to Gain, the word give felt familiar. Women give every day. We give our time, our wisdom, our skills, and our encouragement. And likely one of the most important gifts that we can give is that of being present to each other. Present in this moment, to the person next to us, acknowledging that we see them, truly see them, and all their possibilities. And possibilities are powerful gifts. Perhaps that is what we're really here to give, the possible, and allow the change to unfold. So if I have one wish for you today, it is that for exactly that, the possible to unfold. Many of you come up to us and always say, how do you do it? How do you create these events that we have regularly throughout the year? And we can only do it because of the amazing partners that we have by our side. And it's now my pleasure to acknowledge that we have with us First Ontario Credit Union, Naga Economic Development, Naga Casinos, Pathstone Foundation, Solomon Mani, Outlet Collections at Niagara, Adapt Immigration, Canadian Tire Bank, Habitat for Humanity Niagara, Naga Penn Center, Two Sisters Vineyards, FedCap Canada, Hodgson and Russ LLP, Bridges Niagara, Hatch, DDL and Co., Sedona Care Communities, Naga Peninsula Energy Inc., Ontario Power Generation, University of Niagara Falls, Canada, 13th Street Winery, BCT Events, Innovate Niagara, Silversmith Brewing Company, Giant Shoe Creative Agency, Special Events Rental, UTV, Booth Empire, Dream 105.7, and 610 CKTB. A round of applause for all of them. And we rely on our elected officials to help us out in the policies and creating a framework and a structure that is actually supportive of the private sector and supports the economic and social goals that we collectively have for our region that we call home. So we're very honored to actually be joined today by MP Chris Biddle, MPP Wayne Gates, and MPP Jenny Stevens, Naga Regional Chair Bob Gale, Mayor Cheryl Ganan with West Lincoln, Mayor Marvin Junkin with Pelham, and Mayor Matt Sisko with the City of St. Catharines. And regional councillors Kim Crader, Bob Foster, Barbara Greenwood, Joyce Morocco, Wayne Olson, and Michelle Seaborn. And municipal councillors Joanne Chichokak, Don Dodge, Jackie Linder, Lori Lococo, Robin McPherson, Ruth Ann Nia Bestig, and two more. Mona Patel and Shamila Sitaram. So thank you very much, and a round of applause for all that you do. It is not easy. But before I'm going to introduce our MC, I want to actually ask you to join me in a loud and heartfelt shout out to this year's International Women's Day Award recipient, the extraordinary artist Tisha Romance, whose work reminds us that when women share, yeah, let's do this. Her extraordinary work reminds us that when women share their gifts with the world, as she does so generously, we all gain beauty, inspiration, and a deeper sense of possibility. So thank you, Tricia, for all that you have done for our community. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our MC for the day, the one and only Kara Kresick, Chair of Win Council and Chief Purpose Officer and founder of the API Inc., offering a full ecosystem from consulting, co-working, campus compass, strategy, and the future of work initiatives. But first, before I'm passing the mic over to her, here's a message from Naga Economic Development, followed by one from Innovate Naga. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
All great companies start as brilliant ideas. But while anyone can have a great idea, the trick is to discover how to plug it into the world and reveal its potential. But where do you begin? How do you move from idea to concept to greatness? The Innovate Niagara team can help. We offer the most comprehensive one-window approach to commercializing your idea into something more. Whether you're a graduating student, a fledgling startup, or an established business, Innovate Niagara provides the structure, services, and resources you need to get your new idea or business off the ground. We offer mentorship, market intelligence, tech incubation, workshops and events, and networking opportunities. We pair enterprises with academic and research support and provide guidance for accessing resources. Essentially, our lines reach out to all of what Ontario and Canada have to offer, and we've put it all in one place. We've done the legwork, all you need to do is plug in. Now, we know how difficult money is to come by in the early stages of your business, which is why our services are offered at little or no cost. Apply to be a client on our website for one-on-one consultation, and don't worry about being left on your own. Innovate Niagara is about building relationships and being accountable to you. We provide you with the structure for success and follow-up to ensure you stay connected. These are your ideas, and we think they're amazing. Connect with Innovate Niagara. Plug your ideas into the world.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our 25th annual International Women's Day event presented by Women in Niagara Council, a business council of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. My name is Kara Kresick, and I am very fortunate to be the chair of WIN. We are very pleased to be back here today at the beautiful Falls View Casino Resort and Spa. I did go to the wrong casino before I started the day. So I'm very glad I ended up here, and I apologize to Jillian for being late. We are fortunate to have them again as our host sponsor for the event this year. Actually, the last time we gathered here for International Women's Day was in 2020, and we all know what happened right after. The world changed unexpectedly, and if we look at the journey that we've had since then, I'm sure we could all agree that the world we live in today could use a little bit more feminine energy and collaborations like we see in this room today. It is wonderful to be back in this space together again. I hope you had a chance to enjoy the reception as you arrived, settled into the space, and perhaps with a drink from Silversmith Brewing Company or Pure Botanica in hand, while enjoying music from Carly Gravett, thoughtfully booked by Niagara Jazz Festival. As you came in, you were welcomed by the beautiful entrance decor created by BCT Events. And I hoped many of you stopped to capture the moment at the photo booth from Booth Empire. It's all those small touches, the creativity, the collaboration, and the local talent that helps us set the tone for the afternoon ahead. Also, check your chairs. You may have sat on your special savings from Outlet Collection Niagara. I was there yesterday, also getting ready for the event. We kindly ask that all phones be put to silent so we can fully engage in today's program. But please feel free to use them and post your experience using the hashtag IWD2026. If you need a space to reflect, contemplate, meditate, pray, or simply just take a breath, there is a quiet room located out of these doors down the hall to the right. If you need a mint, a sewing kit, hairspray, or more, we have that covered in the bathroom thanks to our rest and refresh sponsor, the Niagara Pen Center. And a special thank you to our media partners who helped spread the word about today's event, Dream 105.7 and News Talk 610 CKTB. Across Niagara and beyond, progress happens when research and practical experience align. Whether we're talking about entrepreneurship, leadership, philanthropy, or community investment, the common thread is simple. When people invest in one another, everyone moves forward. Today's theme is Give to Gain. And it reflects the idea that contribution, partnership, and shared knowledge create momentum for individuals, organizations, and our broader economy. A huge thank you, all of you, for showing up today. All 600 of you. We hope that after today, you will be able to take something away that you have learned and that you can spread that, action it, and gain from it. I would like to now welcome to the stage the Vice Chair of WIN Council, Marina Glencross.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I share a few updates about women in Niagara, I'd like to start by recognizing the people who make this work possible. The WIN Council is a volunteer advisory council to the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and the work we do is only possible because of the dedication of the incredible women who serve on the council. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the members of WIN Council, past chair Nora Kolb, Innovate Niagara, Jamie Giles, TD Business Banking, Carolyn Mullen, Niagara College, Brandy Fulton, Abatement Technologies and Ravine Estate Winery, Janet Madume, Welland Heritage Council and Multicultural Center Employment Solutions, Kristen Smith, Choligen Technologies Inc., Harley Barfconnect-Zuber, Iron and Oak Railroad Services, Stephanie Benaza, Electro Utilities, Gina Shafrick, These Architects, Inc., Darlene Brito, KPMG, Liliana Busnello, Town of Lincoln, Madeline Gerbracht, Habitat for Humanity Niagara, Lillian Lum, Divine Favor Healthcare Staffing, Alex Martinez, Cleaning Pal, Mojgan Zargamifard, University of Niagara Falls, Canada, Colleen Smith, First Ontario Performing Arts Centre and GNCC Board Liaison, and last but certainly not least, Karina Massicotte, our dedicated GNCC staff liaison. I'd also like to thank the WIN Council members who volunteered their time today. Harley, Madeline, Carolyn, Liliana, Gina, Mojgan, Brandy, and Liliana. And a sincere thank you to the rest of the volunteers who helped make today possible. Katya Perez, Megan McRae, Stephen Pitkinen, Maria Chabotarova, Caroline Tafokwa, Nazrin Ejner, Stani Castillo, Charlotte Siasi, Carrie Carr, Hosna Babudi, Jackie Poulin, Alexis Kleeman, and Sandra Stokes. We're incredibly grateful for the time, energy, and commitment that all of these volunteers bring to the work that we do. For those who may be new to WIN, Women in Niagara is focused on supporting the growth and success of women in business across our region. This year, we are guided by a new strategic plan built around 3 pillars: Amplify, Belong, and Capacity. Amplify focuses on elevating the voices and impact of women in Niagara, highlighting role models, sharing resources, and ensuring women's leadership is visible across our community. Belong is about creating spaces where women feel connected, supported, and part of a strong professional network. And Capacity focuses on strengthening partnerships and programs that help women develop leadership skills, and access new opportunities. You see this work come to life in initiatives like our Women in Business Awards, which last year celebrated over 75 finalists from across Niagara's business community. And nominations for the 2026 Women in Business Awards are now open, so I encourage you to think about the remarkable women you work with, and consider nominating them. Nominations will remain open until the end of August. We also continue to support leadership development through the WIN Bursary for Leadership Niagara, helping women in our community build the skills and confidence to step into leadership roles. Another important partnership this year has been with Equal Voice Niagara. Together, we've been working to provide programming that encourages and supports women in civic leadership. And earlier this year, we hosted a Government 101 session that had nearly 200 people sign up. This demonstrates the strong interest in learning more about how to get involved in public life. We'll also be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Equal Voice Niagara on March 31st. You can find more information about that event in your program. Stay tuned for more programs throughout the year as well. With the municipal election coming up, this work is especially important as we continue to encourage and support more women to consider running for office and increasing representation for our communities. And this year, we're collaborating with the GNCC Councils and EDI Committee on an initiative focused on IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. With support from Brock University, a stream of Blueprint, the new capacity building series will help organizations build more inclusive workplaces where diverse perspectives strengthen businesses and communities. At its core, WIN exists to create opportunities to learn, connect, and lead. And lastly, I want to also thank GNCC for always putting so much effort into executing these fantastic events. I'd like to give a hand to them all for that too. Thank you for all being here today and for being part of a community that continues to support and elevate women across Niagara.
Thank you, Marina. I love that we are the exact same height, so I do not need to change the microphone. This event is made possible through the support of organizations committed to strengthening our community. I'd like to recognize our co-title sponsor, First Ontario Credit Union. Please join me in welcoming Christina Souza, Director of Community Impact.
It's wonderful to see so many people here as we come together to celebrate International Women's Day together. Today gives us the opportunity to recognize the remarkable achievements of women, both in this room and around the world. It is a moment to reflect on how we've come and reaffirm why gender equality is essential to our collective future. This day isn't only about honoring the trailblazers who brought us here today. It's also about uplifting one another and ensuring the next generation has the support, encouragement, and opportunities to lead, to influence, and to create meaningful change. We know that when women thrive, communities thrive. It's through this shared effort that we can strengthen democracy, economic growth, and build a more cohesive, inclusive, and vibrant society, one that empowers women to achieve their full potential. At First Ontario, we are committed to doing our part. We recently launched our Women's Professional Network Group, a space where colleagues can connect, exchange ideas, and support one another. Just last week, we hosted a Women in Leadership panel featuring 4 dynamic and inspiring women leaders who shared their journeys with our staff. More than 75 women from across First Ontario attended, an incredible celebration of learning, connection, and empowerment. Events such as today's luncheon remind us of the power of collaboration and the impact we can make when we come together with purpose. First Ontario is proud to support this event and to stand with all of you in recognizing, celebrating, and advancing the contributions of women in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Supporting strong communities also means supporting the people within them. Our next speaker represents an organization doing critical work to ensure children and families in Niagara have the opportunity and resources they need to thrive. Please join me in welcoming Marla Smith from the Pathstone Foundation.
But I also think International Women's Day is a day of great reflection for us, because behind so many of these women is a story that we don't always see. Moments of doubt, moments of exhaustion, moments where someone wondered if they were good enough. The truth is, strength is rarely built alone. It's built in community, it's built in conversation, it's built when someone sits beside us in a difficult moment and reminds us that we're not alone. And that's why the work at Pathstone Mental Health matters so deeply. Every day, Pathstone supports children, youth, and families across Niagara who are navigating mental health challenges. Many of them are young girls who are growing up in a world that asks a lot of them, sometimes before they're ready. They're trying to find their place, trying to understand who they are, trying to feel like they belong. And sometimes what they need most is simple but powerful. Someone to listen, someone to believe in them, and someone to remind them that their story is not over. At Pathstone, we see what happens when a young person receives that kind of support, when they realize that their feelings are valid and their voice matters, that their future is still full of so much possibility. You can almost see that moment when hope returns for them. And that's the power of community care. International Women's Day reminds us that we have always been builders of that kind of care. We show up for each other. We mentor each other. We encourage. We create spaces for one another to grow. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply remind another woman of her strength. Because when women believe in each other, something extraordinary happens. Confidence grows, leadership grows, and the next generation begins to believe that they can do the same. At Pathstone, our mission is to support mental health of children and youth so that they can live healthy, fulfilling lives. The truth is that mission belongs to all of us. Because every time we choose empathy over judgment, every time we create space for someone to speak, and every time we remind someone that they matter, we are builders of a stronger, healthier community for everyone. And girls watching us today are paying attention. They're learning what courage looks like, they're learning what compassion looks like, and they're learning what it means to support each other. So today on International Women's Day, I hope that we celebrate the women in this room and remember the responsibility that comes with that great strength. To lift each other's up, to reach back and pull each other together forward, and to build a world where no child, no young woman, and no person ever feels that they have to struggle alone. Because when we support mental health and we support each other, we're not just changing lives, we're shaping the future. Thank you.
I never have to raise the microphone. Thank you, Marla. And actually, listening to you, I have to do a little bit of a special call out. Don't worry, Karina. The concept of when you see it, you can be it. And at the apiary, we have a very special little queen. She might be the youngest person here today, as 5-year-old Aubrey. And when I was talking to her mom, Taylor, and we were talking about her coming today, it was she needs to see the amazing, powerful, strong women that will know that are there for her as she grows up. So thank you, Marla, and for those words. And welcome to Aubrey. You see her in her little Chanel-like suit. You can say hello to her. So we now arrive at a momentous occasion in our gathering, the presentation of the International Women's Day Award. Each year, we present an award to a woman in Niagara who captures the spirit of our values at WIN. Someone who has taken the bold actions to be courageous, has made a mark on their industry, and brings a voice to issues that advance our community. Please join me in welcoming Holly Abbott and Josie Agro, sponsors of the International Women's Day Award, as we present this year's recognition.
Created a lasting impact, embodying excellence, dedication, and a spirit that elevates and uplifts others. We heard about that a moment ago, and it's so important. This year's recipient truly embodies that spirit. She's a world-renowned artist, but she's used her success to fund, to support, and to uplift others. I myself was overjoyed when I had an opportunity to purchase some art, the candlelight stroll and a couple other things too, from the artist herself and her family. And I have to tell you that those pieces mean so much to us and have a very, very much a place of honor, you could say, in our household.
In a world that can often feel noisy and divided, it is a gift to pause and remember what the world can look like at its best. Through art, we're reminded of quiet moments, of beauty, of community. A painting can capture something that words often cannot, a feeling, a memory, a moment in time where everything feels calm, hopeful, and possible. For many Canadians, those moments came right to our doorstep, a child flipping through a Sears catalog that arrived at our homes, and there they were, the unmistakable paintings of Trish Romance on the cover. Scenes filled with warmth, light, and everyday magic. Through her extraordinary talent, Trisha created images that people across the country proudly hung on their walls and carried in their hearts. Her work doesn't just depict beautiful places, it captures a feeling of home, of belonging, of dreams realized. What makes her story even more meaningful is that she has used that talent not only to build a remarkable career, but also to give back. Through her generosity, her creativity, and the inspiration she continues to share, she reminds us that art has the power to not only move us, but to bring us together. And it is because of that talent, that impact, and that spirit of generosity that we are so proud to honor her today.
Trisha comes, excuse me, from Hamburg, New York, but moved to Canada to study design and illustration at Sheridan College in Oakville. She since made her home here in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and we are so fortunate that she did. She has credited Niagara-on-the-Lake as an inspiration for her paintings, and she brought the town to the world, capturing and immortalizing the charm of the community. My own childhood was filled with adventures at Trisha's home, and I was truly blessed to have grown up with her influence in my life. Later, as a teenager, working in her beautiful artist garden in Niagara-on-the-Lake, I continued learning from her creativity, her generosity, and the magic she brings to everything she touches. Her skill as an artist has won her the Order of Ontario, the province's highest honor, and she was Canada's Artist of the Year in 1995, 96, 97, and 98. Her paintings have hung in over 400 galleries.
It is what Trisha has done with her talent and her fame that has led us to choose her for this award. Children are a focal point in her artwork and a focal part in her philanthropy. The Trisha Romance Children's Art Fund, hosted by the Niagara-on-the-Lake Public Library, gives children in the community the opportunity to express themselves through art, develop their talents, and perhaps become great artists themselves. Trisha's own art journey was enabled and affirmed by events such as a prize in first grade and the art room of her high school. The Children's Art Fund aims to make sure the other children get to enjoy those same opportunities.
And beyond that, Trisha has also raised money for other charitable organizations, including Sick Kids and the Epilepsy Research Fund of Canada. Her art has themes of caring, safety, and as home as a safe place to strike out and explore the world. Her spirit of giving is the same, caring and nurturing, helping people reach their full potential. For this, the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, where I now live, recognized Trisha with its inaugural Key to the Town in 2024. I was so pleased to be in attendance that day to see a woman I've long admired recognized publicly, just like she's being recognized today. Lord Mayor Gary Zalepa said that recognition was not only for her art and her talent, but for her inspiration to artists, to her lasting impact on the community, and her cultural legacy. For our award today, we would also like to add her spirit of giving, helping, and uplifting.
International Women's Day is about recognizing the work women do to shape the world around them. Trisha's career shows what's possible when talent is matched with energy, vision, and heart. We often think of leadership in terms of entrepreneurship, CEOs, or politicians. Leadership also lives in those who shape how we see the world. Through her art and her philanthropy, Trisha Romance has done exactly that. Her work reminds us that shaping culture is one of the most powerful forms of leadership that there is. On behalf of the GNCC and the Women in Niagara Council, it is our great honor to present the 2026 International Women's Day Award to Trisha Romance for her leadership, her community building, her extraordinary talent, and for the giving of time, talent, and resources, not with the intention to gain, but with the outcome of rising and lifting others. Trisha, please join us on stage, and everyone, please help us congratulate a legend and a role model, Trisha Romance. Whoa! It's the tallest I've ever been. Oh my goodness.
everyone, for as far as my eyes can see, your faces inspire me. I mean, I know that each of you here has a story that you've lived through, and it deserves to be told. Mine is only a small fraction. When I hear these great accolades, I wonder, did I really do all that? Oh my goodness. But thank you. Thank you to the GNCC, and thank you to everyone who has created this important day of recognition and celebration for women, not only internationally, but here in our own community. This is truly remarkable to see this many women in one place celebrating the same thing. Thank you for all being here, truly. People often ask me throughout my career, when did you decide to be an artist? And I always have to chuckle because I think God decides that for you. But when I was 4 years old, I was in isolation in a hospital for a month. A terrible disease had taken over my eyes. And the doctors told my parents that she's likely to go blind. And my parents were of such deep faith. And the doctor said, she's going to need a miracle. And they said, well, we will pray for a miracle. As the weeks went on, of course, every day I was surrounded in bandages on my eyes for 90% of the day. But for about an hour and a half or so, or 2 hours, they would take the bandages off to air my eyes off. But during that time, the nurses would give me a piece of paper and a pencil. And what was strange is that, of course, I wasn't allowed any crayons or anything. No toys in isolation. My doll was taken away from me. But as soon as I started to draw, I started drawing the nurses with their white caps and the doctor with his stethoscope. And, excuse me. The bed. They put me in this iron bed, but it wasn't a bed, it was a crib. And I said, I'm 4 years old. I'm not a baby. And they said, no, you have to stay in this crib. So from that vantage point, I even drew my crib. But I remember the feeling. I remember the feeling that came inside of me from drawing. I remember what it did to me, how it comforted me, how it made me feel powerful, and how it made me feel that everything's okay. So that was the beginning of I knew at that point, that's all I ever wanted to do the rest of my life. And my parents, knowing me as well as they did, knew that she's not going to go blind. She can't go blind. This is what she wants to do for the rest of her life. So eventually I went home. But our home wasn't an ordinary home. My father had built our home, not too small, not too big. Little did he know he was going to have 4 daughters under the roof. A friend of mine, all through high school, would come home to visit, come home after school. She said, coming home to your house after school was like entering the book Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. She said, if you've ever seen the movie or read the book, that was our home. We were a group of 4 little women that were extremely industrious. And my mother, the practical one, made sure that we knew we had every skill that we could ever need the rest of our lives. And that was learning how to make your own clothes, making meals, baking, canning, growing vegetables and canning them, and also, of course, making jam. And so that was my mother's side. My father's side, on the other hand, we always declared he was the most contented man on planet Earth. He was full of wisdom. In his own quiet way, he always had an answer. And so he actually was the one who I think invented the happiness compass, because whenever you looked at a problem in your life, you'd say, well, should I be there or not be there? Does it make me happy? If it doesn't make me happy, well, then I shouldn't be there, because you will never succeed if you're not happy with what you're doing. So that was the beginning of my life in this cozy home, in a place where we knew we were not only truly loved, but we were supported in every way. Now, this was growing up in the 50s and the 60s. And back then, artists, fine artists, were considered potentially starving artists. And my parents knew this. So the only ones who thrived in the art field were the commercial artists. And so they kind of led me to believe, they saw my fashion illustrations, and they said, well, why don't you, go to school for fashion illustration? My art teacher fed them the same, thing, that Trisha would make a great fashion illustrator. So off to Sheridan I went. I was the very first one to go to the school, the first American to go to the school. God loved my dad. He drove me across that border in a rickety old Ford car, and I met the president, the very first president of Sheridan, Jack Porter. It was a construction site at the time. The only thing that was partially finished was the cafeteria. And he met me there. He saw my portfolio, and he said, he thought, oh, you're an in for here. We'd love to have you. If you do come, you'll be the first American to come to our school. And I said, but there's one problem. I said, how much is this going to cost? I said, I'm paying for this myself. Of course, my parents believe that the way they raised us, whether you go to university, college, whatever you do, you're paying for it yourself. So I said to Mr. Porter, I said, but how much is this going to cost? And he said, well, $200. And I said, $200 for a week? And he said, no, that's a year for your whole tuition. I said, then I can afford it. And he said, well, if you can afford it, you're welcome to come to Sheridan. I said, and of course, I was absolutely thrilled. Drove home and I said, I'll be packing for Canada. That was what happened. So that was back in 1969. In that same year, that summer before leaving for Canada, there was a competition. Well, not a competition. It was called a beauty pageant. And it was in the village next to ours. It was a village that grew corn. So every year, similar to our grape and wine festival here, they would select a queen to be crowned and a king. First, you had to go through the pageant. And it meant I had to make my own gown for it. And I designed my own gown and made my own gown for this. I was number 13. And part of the competition was you'd be asked a question, and it depended on how you answered that question, what your fate would be. So I was called to the podium. I was number 13, and the gentleman said, if you were a man, what career would you choose? And I thought it was a trick question. I grew up to believe you can be anything, no matter what you chose, you could be anything. And so I had to think for a moment, and I said, well, I intend on being an artist, and I don't intend on having any problems, whether man or female. I think you have the world is your option, and there shouldn't be a discrepancy. And so anyway, the whole audience clapped, and next thing you know, I was crowned Miss Sweet Corn. All because of the answer. But all because basically my parents had raised us that way. 4 girls, no brothers, but we were raised to believe that all it takes is self-confidence, confidence in who you are, be the best you can be. Doesn't matter what your competition is. And even my dad used to say, you are going to run into trouble one day. You're living in this safe little household, this under the eaves of this house, but one day you could run into trouble. And all he kept saying was, stay in your lane. And what he meant like that, of course, he was a lover of the Olympics, watching them, and he said, stay in your lane. You may have someone over here who's trying to take you down and someone over here that hates you for it, but you stay in your lane, be the best you can be, and just look straight to the finish of what you want to do. So, anyways, weird, I got off on a tangent of Sheridan there. Straight out of Sheridan, I was so blessed to get a dream job, and I mean a dream job, with Fashion Illustration. My work was being published every single night in the newspaper. My parents were so proud. And 6 months went on, and I had this easel in this big office, and my work, had to be, it was always very rapidly, having to go out to the newspaper. So after 6 months, I looked out the window and thought, I've never traveled. I've never seen all the great art that I studied in art history. And I may be stuck here forever. And so I went to the boss and I said to the boss, I have a problem. This is the most incredible dream job, but I really feel that I need to travel. And he said, well, don't come to me. You got to go to the big guy on the 4th floor. And I said, oh, no. So I made an appointment, took the elevator up to the 4th floor, and met with this gentleman who was like my father. And he said to me, well, if you were my daughter, I would tell her to travel. And this was going unbelievably well. He said, I will leave your job open for 6 months, and you have to come back in 6 months. I said, oh, I'll be here. Well, as many of you know, I was in Europe for 2 years. I never did make it back. Never made it back to that incredible job that I had. But what that did for me after those 2 years in Europe was that I did seek out all of these paintings and sculptures, everything that I had studied in school. I went all the cathedrals, everything that was so, so important to me. And I was so inspired by it. And the lives that they had to live in order to become artists. I read all their stories, and those stories so inspired me. That gave me the power, when I finally got home, to go back to Toronto, get a little apartment, a studio apartment, and from there, that's where I started. The love of my life was watercolor. And I started all these paintings. Most of them were barns and homes and things of that nature, but I would stick them under my bed. And then, as God would have it, I met Gary. A force to be reckoned with is my husband, Gary. I think Josie knows that. And he, of course, when going, he starts talking about your lives. And I said, well, I have these paintings, And he said, where? And I said, under my bed. He said, under your bed? Well, let me see them. And so I showed him all my paintings. He said, what are you doing with paintings under your bed? People need to see these. And I said, well, I'm not taking them. I can't take them anywhere for people to see. We said, well, I will sell them. I will show people. And he did. He not only went, back then, door to door was very accepted. So he started with that. But then he ended up, we did outdoor art shows, which was another huge thing back then. And from there, he was selling my paintings out so quickly, I couldn't keep up with it. And eventually, of course, they went into galleries. And once they hit the galleries, I was then also unable to keep up with the amount of pieces that he was selling. So we eventually got married. And eventually comes your firstborn, Nathan. And it was an extremely long labor. And Dr. Phillips, our beloved doctor, finally Nathan's born, and he places Nathan in my arms. And I said, I have to paint him. And everything just changed, everything. I had no desire, the paintings of the houses and barns, all of a sudden I said, oh my goodness, just like that. I was witnessing for the first time that motherhood was a superpower. Not just in everyday life, but as an artist, I discovered this superpower. The amount of inspirations that I had daily, I would do sketches of them. And I still have all these hundreds of thousands of sketches that never became paintings. They were inspirations just from being a mother and the things I encountered. And then along, of course, came Tanya, who's here today, who, by the way, is my hero today. She ran all the way back to the 8th floor of the parking lot in her stilettos to try to bring my glasses, because I wouldn't be able to even do this without them. So anyways, Tanya entered our world. More sketches, because now we had the interaction between Nathan and Tanya, so more inspiration was happening. And then needless to say, when Whitney came, now this true family, I mean, the inspiration was endless. And like I said, this incredible gratitude in my heart, for God leading me to where I was then. I mean, it was a completion for me to have children. I have always been inspired by hearing your stories, but I've also, throughout my journeys in life, loved hearing stories of women from the past. I am a real lover of history, and to read stories about the pioneer women who took those wagon trails all the way to the West. And I believe today that without those women, the West would never have been developed. It was the women that held together these wagons. The men were these wild, crazy men that wanted to go and discover gold, and it was the women that were able to get them there. And that is truly something I've always carried with me. But one of the stories comes from the beloved Beatrix Potter. And I'm sure all of you, or many of you, know that she was the creator of Peter Rabbit. Her life, back in 1897, she was a scientist at heart, a natural scientist at heart. And her studies and her drawings and her in depth of what she studied was truly a volume of work. And her dad said, similar to my dad, her dad said, you need to take those to London, to the Linnean Society, the Society of Natural History. And so she went to London. They loved what she had done. Her drawings were almost photographic. Her watercolors of mushrooms and fungi were almost photographic. And they said, we love these, and they are indeed better than anything we've ever seen, but we can't accept them because you're a woman. That was in 1897, and it wasn't until 1997 that they came up with a posthumously given apology to Beatrix Potter. She didn't become a victim of this. She became a survivor. And similar to what my dad said about staying in your lane and focusing and being the best you can be, she went home from London, went to her garden where she had a little family of rabbits and other creatures, and she decided to do the stories of Peter Rabbit. which she self-published in those little books. She self-published because, once again, if she tried to publish it, she would have to change her name to a man's name. And she said, I'm not doing that. I'll self-publish before I do that. And those stories have lived long and will live long in history because of her decision. And throughout my life, my dad's advice has been ever present. Be the best you can be and don't look left or right. Help others along the way. And I don't know if I have met so many mothers who have brought their children to me and said, and want me to see their artwork. And I look at this artwork and I look at children's art and think, that's their soul. I can't even begin to say yes or no. This is their soul. And every artist's style is different. Every artist's sketches are different. And that's the beauty of art, is that I could never, ever judge. And they want me to judge, but I can't judge because everyone, that's their soul that's been there on canvas or paper. Always stay close to God, he would say, because God has a plan. And for each and every one of you, I would like to pass on my dad's advice. God does have a plan. He always does. Through thick and thin, he always has lifted me up. And I depended on his plan. Right to this moment where I am here, right today. He even had a plan for that. And I am so grateful to everyone that has come together to create this moment in time for everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I didn't know this was for me. Thank you so much. It will have a place of honor in our lives, in our home. Thank you. I know just where it's going to go.
Thank you, Tricia. And thank you for telling your story. And I think about, you were saying, of history, but it is also her story. So thank you for your story. Thank you again, Tricia, for the inspiring remarks and for the lasting impact you continue to have on our community through your art and your generosity. Our next speaker represents an organization that plays an important role in supporting newcomers and helping people build their futures here in Niagara. Please join me in welcoming Teresa Papachan from Adapt Immigration, one of our key sponsors, to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just realized that apart from the name, Trisha and Teresa, me and Trisha have a few things in common. We got into fashion designing earlier in my life. I also got into fashion designing. I also won a small beauty pageant. Nobody knows until now. I also love to draw, but the only small thing, very, very tiny thing, is I cannot draw to save my life. So, except for that, we're practically twins. Congratulations again, well-deserved award. We're proud to be the lunch sponsor for International Women's Day celebration today. Thank you, GNCC and WIN, for having us. I have a special connection to this event. When I moved to the Niagara region, fairly new, one of the first GNCC events that I attended was the International Women's Day. I still remember walking in and being genuinely surprised, in the best way, of course, by the number of women in the room, the energy, the sheer power of business here in Niagara. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a place where women really show up and lead. And I'm proud to build my businesses here. A quick word about Adapt. We're right here based in Niagara region. We specialize in business and corporate immigration. Simply put, we help employers hire and retain international talent and support entrepreneurs, making it easier to navigate the maze of policy changes and paperwork. We're also always looking to support businesses and projects that create a significant benefit to the community, so Niagara grows in a way we can all be proud of. I hope you enjoy lunch and still enjoying lunch. My only ask is keep the conversations going, say hello to someone new, make a connection, share a tip or contact, because the best opportunities usually start with a simple conversation. Thanks again. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Teresa. We're proud to have an incredible group of vendors with us today. Many of them are women-owned and women-led businesses, starting with Sonota Care Communities. You'll find the full list of vendors in your program, and we encourage you to take some time in the intermission to stop by their booths, say hello, support their work, ask them what they do. And speaking of the program, you will see some information about Bridges Niagara services on the back page as well. Please also enjoy the delicious wine from 13th Street Winery being served today. As you sip your wine, take note of your wine tag provided by DDL & Co. These are actual seeds, so be sure to bring them home and plant it. We're also grateful to Special Events Rentals for providing the beautiful napkins on your tables. Another thoughtful detail that helps us bring the event together. University of Niagara Falls, Canada is with us today. I met them earlier at our booth, helping brighten our tables and the future by expanding learning opportunities and opening new pathways for women pursuing careers and leadership in Niagara. During the intermission, I'd also encourage you to take some time to visit the silent auction at the back there. This can be a sport at some events, so we ask that you generously donate, but kindly. The auction is sponsored by Two Sisters Vineyards. The funds raised will go towards supporting leadership training for women in Niagara, helping create opportunities for the next generation of leaders. You'll also see conversation starters on the screen throughout the event. We encourage you to use them to spark some dialogue at your tables, to get to know the people around you a little bit better, and make new connections today. And while you're connecting and enjoying the break, you will notice cameras moving around the room. Giant Shoe Creative is capturing the event for us today, so keep an eye out for photos early next week. Enjoy your intermission. We will see you back in a bit. We're going to get started with the next part of the program in just a moment. But first, we have an amazing prize to give away that has been generously sponsored by Hudson Russ. So thank you to the team for supporting today's event. And there is a draw, 2 draws for tickets to 2 hockey games. You may have seen their booth at our vendor alley. They are a U.S. attorney law firm and have an office in Buffalo and an office in Toronto. So the first draw is to see the Toronto Maple Leafs play against the Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo. Just so you do need a passport in order to win this prize. So I am going to pull the first winner. Winner. Okay. This is for the Toronto Maple Leafs play against the Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo. And Nina Termel? Nina Termel? Awesome. Congratulations, you are going to Buffalo. Second draw is to see the women's hockey team. The Toronto Scepters play against Boston in Toronto. No passports needed. Okay. I got 2. Okay. Going to Toronto. Jennifer Tissey, you are going to Toronto. Amazing. Enjoy the games. Thank you so much.
Imagine spending the day making memories, strengthening relationships, and helping families right here in Niagara. Well, we've got just the experience for you. Habitat for Humanity Build Days are a one-of-a-kind experience and gives your team the chance to roll up their sleeves and help build safe, affordable homes for local families. You don't need construction skills, just a big heart and a willingness to help. But you'll be building more than homes. You'll be building a place for a family to call home, making memories, learning new skills, and building better bonds with your team. For a minimum donation, you'll receive training, safety gear, tools, a fantastic t-shirt, and lunch. Spots fill quickly. Reserve your Habitat Build Day today and be part of building stronger, more vibrant communities, one house at a time.
Just took a little run, no problem. Yeah, we're good. We are thankful to have the support of Sullivan on this event. Please welcome Cheryl Johnston to introduce our keynote speaker.
So I'm so happy to be here today. I'm very happy to hear the story with regards to Beatrix Potter. She's a personal hero of mine. And I actually get choked up about this because International Women's Day is so important to me. And I'm so very happy that I'm here to help support celebrating this event and celebrating especially the Gift to Gain theme. Because this theme emphasizes the power of reciprocity and support, meaning when people, organizations, and communities like ours give generously, opportunities and support for women increase. This theme aligns with how my firm, Sullivan Mahoney, practices in its commitment to the community and being community-minded. This commitment to the community has always been of particular importance to me, as is International Women's Day. With regards to its commitment to forging equality, celebrating the progress made in advancing women's rights, and highlighting the ongoing efforts needed to ensure women fully participate in all aspects of society. I am so glad that GNCC has put together this wonderful event to bring us all here today. It's raising awareness with regards to what it means, and it's also providing us this fantastic opportunity to celebrate. It is with my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Marwa Abdou. And I did a little research in addition with regards to the information that I was provided, because I want you to understand the depth and the breadth of which her knowledge and her experiences have contributed. Marwa is the Senior Research Director at the Business Data Lab, or BDL, of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, where she leads the Research Center of Excellence. Now, if you don't know, the BDL is a future-focused initiative aimed at enhancing the understanding of business conditions in Canada through real-time data and insights. Marwa has also led technical assistance and capacity building across the Middle East, Africa, and the Asia Pacific, working with institutes such as the World Bank, APEC, which is the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation, that operates as a cooperative, multilateral, international, intergovernmental grouping who are committed to reducing barriers to trade and investment. Also with OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, again, an intergovernmental organization that promotes policies to improve economic and social well-being globally. Also with the Commonwealth Secretariat, which is the main intergovernmental agency of the Commonwealth of Nations that operates to facilitate cooperation among member countries and to promote democracy, development, and human rights. And the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, who is a leading multilateral development bank with, I believe, about 69 members, supporting inclusive, resilient, and sustainable growth across Asia and the Pacific. It works with its members to solve together complex challenges, harness innovative financial tools and strategic partnerships to transform lives, build quality infrastructure, and safeguard our planet. Marwa previously served as an advisor to the Minister of International Cooperation of Egypt, supporting private sector engagement and economic diplomacy efforts. Marwa's insights are always valued by the business and economic communities, but they are also particularly important today. Please join me in welcoming her to this podium.
Wow, what an introduction. I guess my work is done. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for that generous introduction. And thank you to the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, to Kara, to Karina, to Mishka, to Hugo, to the team behind this incredible event. It is not lost on me how much effort and planning goes into an event like this. So I'm deeply humbled to be here. And to join you for International Women's Day. It is too a very important day for me, although I do celebrate it every day because I'm a big believer in that. But on this day, for the last couple of years, the way that I've tried to give back to Canada, to our communities, is by inundating them with really depressing data about just how far we have not come and how far we have come. All that being said, it is my pleasure to share some of those insights that I've sort of been working on since 2023. I joined the BDL in 2022, and it was quite a homecoming for me to come back after 15 years away from Canada, and it was time for me to come and tell some stories about what's happening in our country. I'm the daughter of immigrants, grew up in Kingston, Ontario. Some fun facts about me. So it is quite humbling to be on this stage right now. And I do think of Trisha's comments about the home that she grew up in. And I grew up in a home that had incredibly badass parents who told me I could do anything and who risked everything to come halfway around the world to give me the opportunity to do that. So this is a shout out to them. Okay, now with that being said, it is a real privilege to be in this room. Chambers, at their core, are communities of builders, people who create businesses, people who take risks, people who create jobs, and invest in their local economies. And so when we talk about women's economic participation, it is often conversations like this one in rooms that are filled with entrepreneurs, that are filled with professionals, community leaders, and where the gap between potential and reality becomes incredibly obvious. Because the question that we are confronting today is not whether women have ideas, not whether they have ambition, not whether they have capability. Anyone who looks around this room can see all of that in plain sight. And so the question for me is something deeper. Why, despite decades of progress, do our systems still make it harder for women to lead, to scale their businesses, and to accumulate the same economic power? That question is what I spend a lot of time in my little research cave thinking about and trying to answer. So before I get into the findings, I want to start with why I do this work, if it hasn't become obvious already. I lead research at the Business Data Lab, as Cheryl mentioned, and it's basically the data and analytics arm of the Canadian Chamber. It's funded by the Government of Canada. We've been around since 2022. I urge you all to check out our research at businessdatalab.ca. And my job is to really turn big economic questions into evidence, and to bring it to the powers that be and say, you think this is how far we've come, but actually this is how far we've come. So we have some work to do. I also bring that approach to of sort of lifting the veil to our podcast called Canada's Economy Explained, which I host. And I try to sort of pace back, like I said, the language, the lexicon, the clunky words that economists usually shell out to all of us, and to really talk about real questions that I'm sure everybody's asking, and that are relevant for everyone in Canada. So this year's theme, as many of the speakers noted, in terms of International Women's Day and this event, is Gift to Gain. Every year, International Women's Day has a theme, and I think this idea really captures something very, very important and crucial about how economies work. We often think of growth as something that happens when individuals succeed. But when you look closely at the data, growth is actually an ecosystem story. It depends on whether opportunity circulates. It happens when leaders open networks, when they share knowledge, when they mentor new founders, or invest in their communities. They are not simply giving something away. They are expanding the number of people who are able to create value in their economy and in their communities. And that, to me, is what Gift to Gain actually means. It's not losing, but it's gaining. And so with that, I will be honest with you, the data I'm about to share is far from perfect. Some groups are still missing. Some experiences are flattened into averages. Some realities can't be captured by a simple survey or a spreadsheet. But the imperfect data is not an excuse to sit idly by or to sort of to have inaction. So it is a reason for us to be humble, but also to feel the urgency of this. And in this case, it tells us whether what we are seeing in our own individual lives is an exception or a pattern. And in this case, it is very much a pattern. So with that, I'm here to talk to you about the missing founders, the missing leaders, and the growth that Canada is leaving behind. As we all know, Canada's at a serious inflection point. We hear this every day in the news. We know that we are at a pretty consequential economic crossroads. We know that productivity is slowing. We know that growth is flattening. We know that business dynamism is weaker than it used to be. Fewer new firms are being created. Self-employment hasn't recovered from where it was in the pandemic or before the pandemic. And yet, like I said, when I look at this country, I don't see a shortage of talent. I don't see a shortage of ideas. What I do see is a shortage of data being utilized in order to maximize participation. So what we have is a participation problem. And that problem shows up most clearly when we look at women. Now, something that I want everybody to keep in mind, and it was important for me as I think about how I want to frame this topic, is the ecosystem mindset is really, really important because women have multiple pathways towards career progression. All of us do, theoretically, in an economy that has equal opportunity. But what's interesting is that women face barriers any which way they go. In leadership, in pay, in entrepreneurship, these are not isolated issues. They reinforce each other, and that's why it's important and critical for us to think that way and to see this as a systemic challenge within an entire ecosystem where women face glass ceilings, where they face broken rungs in their ascent, either in traditional career pathways or in entrepreneurship. When women are underrepresented in leadership, they have less influence over decisions. When they are paid less, they have less capital to take risks. When they try to build businesses, they face higher hurdles at every single step. These barriers are not accidental. They are baked into how we design the system and how the system is rigged against women, and minority groups. Now, looking at the big picture, so what inspired this research for me was in 2023, Secretary General of the UN came out and said something along the lines of women won't reach equal, around also International Women's Day, women won't reach equal for another 100 years. I was like, great news. So I said, okay, well, I wonder what it would look like if I actually dug into the data for Canada and tried to project forward how much time we have yet to go. My hope was not much time or not any time at all. I was sorely mistaken. Even though I sit and do this research, I am by default an optimist, which always goes against me because I sit there and then I was like, this can't be right. This data can't be right. So looking at the big picture, when I started exploring this topic almost 3 years ago, I started at the top. Basic simple metric of looking at the share of women managers across OECD countries. The latest data was from 2022 at the time. And where do we stand? Suffice to say that the spectrum ranges from 13% in Japan to 46% in Latvia. Canada sits at 37%, which is only slightly higher than the 34% of the OECD average. And that matters because, as I mentioned, management is the pipeline to decision making. So if women aren't proportionally present in management, they're not proportionally present where budgets, where hiring, where procurement, where investment, where decisions are made. The data that I'm covering, like I said in the presentation, is mostly available in two landmark studies, one of from 2024, 2025. They're available on their website, so you can take your time and peruse this data. I did go back and try to update the data to get something a little bit more current. And one of the things that I think is important is to look at the gender wage gap. And when we're looking at the gender wage gap, what we're talking about is the difference between the median earnings of men and of women relative to the median earnings of men. So what I mean by that is if you were to take the median earnings of men who work full-time, full year, and then we take the median earnings of women who work full-time, full year, and we ask how much lower are women's earnings compared to men, the wage gap, this is the wage gap internationally. Canada's wage gap is approximately 16% compared to the OECD average of 11%. So when we say that, what we mean is that for every dollar the typical man earns, women earn about 84 cents on the dollar in 2023. And I'm sure that hasn't changed much in 2025, I'm sorry to say, or 2026. That is not comparing part-time to full-time. That's not comparing different hours. That's not adjusting for occupation, education, or industry. That's not looking at minority groups. It's just simply looking at averages of what full-time workers are actually taking home in real life. So what does that actually mean in human terms? It means that year after year, women start with less financial room to move. They save less, not because they're worse at saving, but because there's less left to save. They invest less, not because they are less ambitious, but because the margin for error is that much thinner. They take fewer risks, not because they're timid, but because the cost of failure is higher. So over time, those 16 cents on the dollar compound, and it affects how much wealth women can build, but how much wealth our economy can build. So it affects how easily they can finance or self-finance a business idea. It affects whether they can survive a bad year, a quarter, or even a failed first attempt. Now, when we look at how that gap has evolved over time, there is no doubt that it has improved slowly, unevenly, even more so when we sort of layer in OECD averages. But again, when we compare ourselves to Western countries and Commonwealth nations, the gap is pretty glaring. By 2024, if you look at the map, so Canada is denoted in red, the United States is in red, Canada is denoted in purple. And so when we look at the gap, we are slightly better than the US, but that's ticking up and certainly much farther behind than Australia, than Sweden, than New Zealand, than Norway. So that slow progress has a pretty glaring cost. Let me start with the first report that I did, and it looked at women in leadership. And again, I started with very, just an open mind, curious. I wanted to see what data was available. So I went to StatsCan and I looked at sort of, well, what information is available on women in management, and I found some data using formal occupational definitions of middle management and above from StatsCan across 19 different management occupations. And then I looked at also data from the population census and compared two very, very simple metrics: representation and compensation. Right off the bat, I want you to notice two glaring things. And again, you can take your time perusing through this data. One is that women's representation is still low, lower than their share of population in most occupational categories, in most leadership pipelines, with the exception of specialized middle management, which are incidentally the same sectors where women have been traditionally been pegged to as a result of long-standing stereotypes. We're talking education, we're talking healthcare, social and community services, art, culture, and public admin. The second stark finding, even when women are present, the pay ratios still lag. So in fact, even when there is a share of women that outweighs that of their male counterparts, the median income of women is still a fraction of men. So it's not just about getting in the room. It's what happens when you're in it. All right, so let's look at how the representation gaps changed over time. So I looked at data the data goes back to 1987. Latest data, as far as I know, is up until 2023. And that's also a problem with working in this field, is that you're constantly banging your head asking people, can you please give me more data? This is not hard. It's 2026. That being said, one thing that people did ask me when we published the research is, why is my representation metric tied to women's share of population? And I agree with that instinct. Population should not be the end-all, be-all yardstick. It does not capture differences in preferences. It doesn't capture training pipelines. It doesn't capture life stages or structural constraints. So it's not the end of the story, but it is very important first pass, because in a world where opportunity is theoretically broadly accessible, where barriers were not systematically filtering people out based on gender, geography, race, age, you would expect that representation in major economic roles to at least roughly resemble the population share over time. Not perfectly, and certainly not mechanically. So if women make up half of the population, and yet they make up less than half of leadership roles, high-paying occupations, or business ownership, the burden of explanation should not be on women or their choices. It should be on the system that is producing that large persistent gap. And so for me, population is a fair baseline. And it is saying sort of, if you are far from that benchmark and staying far from it for decades on end, then something structural is happening. And we need to question that. And that's exactly what we see. So when we look at sort of representation gaps over time, we see that over time, across all occupations, women went from 43% to 48% over a period of almost 40 years. So that's a tick up of 5% in representation. In management occupations, we did a little bit better. We went from 27% in 1987 to 35% in 2023. Yay us. Okay, so progress, right? I'm gonna celebrate every bit of progress. Now, here's what was interesting about this data and where some of the conversations got really meaty even with government, right, when I published this report. When we look at representation gaps meaning the share of women in the census compared to the share of women across all occupations. The highest gaps are in Ontario and Saskatchewan, with the lowest being in eastern provinces. Now, there are many factors that play into that. And again, this is part of the breaking down the narratives that we tell ourselves, is that this is equal across the board. It's not. And I think it's part of why we need to add more nuance and data to this conversation. And part of that can happen because of sector and industry compositions. It can be about the sports that are being offered in those regions. When it comes to management occupations, the picture is a little bit more stark. So you see that Atlantic Canada and Quebec have slightly smaller representation gaps. Others like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario lag. And that matters because the ability to advance again or to access opportunities is not evenly distributed geographically. In terms of earnings, the data goes as far back to 1997, so it's a period of about 30 years. And so when we look at the wage story, even when we see progress in representation shares, the reality is that it doesn't always translate to closing compensation gaps. Women still earn less than men overall. Looking at the core working age group, which is 25 to 54, the share of women's to men's wages had only increased 5 cents over 30 years. Across all occupations, 8 cents on the dollar for management. The point that I want you to hold on to when you hear all of this is that wage gaps are not abstract, right? They are a constraint on risk-taking, as I mentioned at the top. So if you earn less over time, you save less, you borrow differently, you invest differently, and you have less margin for entrepreneurial risk. Here's where the story gets super interesting, if it hasn't already. So when we break management into different categories, the biggest gains for women over time have been in specialized middle management. So roles like HR, finance, policy, professional services, knowledge-intensive functions. That's good news. In fact, in those specialized middle management roles, we actually reached gender parity around 2020. But as you all remember, something pretty drastic happened in 2020 for us all and for the world. When COVID happened, it hit service-oriented and people-facing and administrative-heavy roles the hardest. And so women bore the brunt of that immediately. And those job losses and disruptions hit women first. So what looked like steady progress suddenly reversed. And that teaches us something incredibly crucial about how all of this works. Progress is not guaranteed. So it's not a straight line. And so it's not something that you achieve once and then you rest on your laurels and you're like, oh, we've made it, it's done. Systems can snap back when there's a shock, when there's crisis, or there's a policy blind spot. And so it's important that when progress is that slow, linear models start to break down. So when I was trying to figure out, you see at the top of the bar charts, I said, reach parity in 2020, but regressed. And then I move on to other management occupations, which I will also cover. The way that I did that is I went back to my high school calculus. Hello, nerd over here. Does anybody remember y equals mx plus b? I went to my chief economist. I was like, I'm going to nerd out. And he was like, okay, be cool. And so I started drawing a line and I said, okay, well, if we pretend that progress was like a linear function and we were kind of truckling along on a straight line, when will we reach this magic number, magic year where we all get to be equal? And so a linear model assumes that you have steady, you have consistent, you have consistent improvement, but actually in reality, what we see when you look at the data is that you see a series of starts and stops. You see gains and reversals. You see long flat periods and then sudden drops. So instead of a smooth line upward, the real story actually looks like a very jagged path. And so for me, when progress is slow and fragile, it's easy for leaders to think, this will fix itself over time. It's fine. the data says that it won't. So without intentional design, without policy, without accountability, the system doesn't naturally drift towards equality. The system will drift to whatever is easiest for the existing structures to maintain. So that's something that we need to also keep in mind in this work. In terms of other middle management occupations, when we look at sort of retail and wholesale trade management, and in the trades and transportation, production and utilities, progress has been much slower. If we take almost 40 years of data and simply sort of project that trend upward, parity in retail and wholesale trade management won't be reached until roughly the year 2121. About a century from now. In trades and transportation, I couldn't even get a number because the progress has been so slow that it was like, we cannot predict when this will happen because we went from 15% to 18% in a period of 40 years. And so the linear model didn't work. But all that being said, you know, as much as I try to make light of all of this, it's not something that we should sort of take lightly. Turning over to women in senior management, there is some good news, as much as we can celebrate any. Women in legislative and senior management roles have seen modest progress from 21% in 1987 to 30% in 2023. The timeline to parity is still sort of measured in decades, 79 years, so less than a century, yay. That's what I do, by the way, when I'm in my research cave. I'm like, oh, a little ray of hope. Let's just like try to highlight that. And then when we look at sort of women in senior management, again, provincially, you see both representation and income gaps. Quebec is actually the closest towards parity in senior management and income ratios. If you look at sort of men to women and their earnings. And so when we talk about solutions, we also have to resist this idea that one size fits all. And the barriers and policy levers are going to matter a great deal. Now to the entrepreneurship side of this whole puzzle. It was important for me. So the first report was published in 2024. The second I published last year around also International Women's Day. And it was important for me to talk about entrepreneurship mainly because I am surrounded by people who are very entrepreneurial, and not just because, you know, I work for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and I need to talk about businesses. But for me, I think it's also important because when we think about Canada and how it's struggling with all that it's struggling with economically, it matters so much more because when the entire system is becoming more risk averse, when the system is becoming more concentrated, when it's becoming more closed off to new entrants, the groups that already face the higher barriers feel that tightening first, and they feel it the hardest. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as well when we're thinking about all of this. So if Canada has an entrepreneurship problem in general, women face an extra friction on top of that, and women are effectively being taxed and double hit by a double constraint. And so not to sort of reiterate the kind of climate that we're living in, it was important for us to sort of contextualize all of this, which I discussed at the top. And so where I wanted to start when I wrote the Women in Leadership report, it was really important for me to bring that sort of thinking and that lens to entrepreneurship. And so I started in budget 2018, where the Government of Canada announced new investments totaling $2 billion, echoing its continued commitment to advance women's entrepreneurship. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, the WES, and it really builds on the government's, at the time, empowerment agenda. It introduced a sort of whole of government approach that positions women's entrepreneurship as an integral part of Canada's growth strategy. The WES aimed to double the number of women-owned businesses by 2025. By our calculations, that would mean that you would have to increase between 2018 to 2025 the number of majority women-owned businesses by 275,000 businesses. And by 2025, we had all but added 20, I think something like 25,000 businesses. So not even a tenth of that goal. What was interesting is I wanted to use the OECD's core concept of missing entrepreneurs, and it's basically a simple way of asking a very powerful question. If groups that are currently underrepresented in entrepreneurship, so we're talking women, youth, immigrants, seniors, immigrants, indigenous communities, LGBTQ+, if they were participating at the same rate as the benchmark group, typically non-racialized men who are aged 30 to 49, shocker, how much entrepreneurial potential are we leaving behind? So that, just to keep in mind, that benchmark group is not better or sort of more deserving. It is simply that that group is historically and structurally they've faced fewer barriers to entry, to scale, to starting their businesses. And so becomes a very important reference point for us as we think about all of this. So when you apply that to Canada, what you find is that women make up the single largest group compared to, if you were to say the population of women and the share of women entrepreneurs, women make up the largest share of missing entrepreneurs. In other words, more than any other group, women represent the biggest pool of people who, based on their skills, who based on their interests, based on their demographics, could be building businesses, but are not. And so I wanted to give a number as to like, okay, well, what does this like missing number of women entrepreneurs, what is it? And so by my calculations, that number is 710,000 women-owned businesses across the country are missing. Yeah, did I hear a whoa? Okay. As I said, these are not women who lack ideas. They're not women who lack ambition. They are women with capability and potential to build, but who are not building because we've simply made it incredibly hard for them to build. Now, in geeky economic terms, when you translate that gap over those 6 to 7 years, had we empowered those 275,000 women that we had set for ourselves to double the share of women entrepreneurs, we would have capitalized on 150, this is just like a rough estimate, $150 billion. So that's not symbolic, that's output that never happened. Real firms that were never built, real jobs that were never created, real innovators that never saw the light of day or reached the market. And so to put that in perspective, it's not necessarily the same as a trade war with our neighbors down south. It is large enough to matter per productivity. But unlike the trade war, this is something that is not happening to us. It's something that we are doing to ourselves. So I want everyone to sort of take stock of that. It's just like if somebody came to you and said, here's a check for $150 billion. You're like, nah, thanks, I'm fine, I'm good. So for me, that number is not meant to shock people. It's just meant to sort of ground our thinking on what we're leaving on the table. I talk a lot about inclusive growth, and that is very much rooted in my identity as a person. Tricia, I'm also a person of deep faith. And so I think about that as a duty and a responsibility that we have to each other to think about who we're leaving outside of the room and why we're doing that. I guess I'm getting close to time, so I don't want to sort of harp on this depressing set of data, but the global context in all of this is that a larger share of Canada's missing entrepreneurs are women compared to the OECD average. So in other words, we are doing far worse in terms of giving our women entrepreneurs opportunities. This is an interesting slide because women in Canada actually show very strong early stage entrepreneurship, actually compared to like women in OECD countries. So the stories that It's not that they don't want to start up businesses. They do, is that starting is not the same thing as scaling. And so that's where the pipeline tends to stall. And this slide actually is always a big aha moment for a lot of people. Women's participation is higher in nascent entrepreneurship than in new business ownership. And so when we talk about nascent entrepreneurship, that rate is really saying, what is the proportion of the population that is actively involved in setting up a business that they will either own or co-own, but that business has not yet paid salaries, wages, or any other payments to the owners for more than 3 months. Whereas new business ownership is the proportion of the population that is currently an owner or a manager of a business that is paid salaries, that is paid wages, other payments for more than 3 months, but not more than 42 months. So when you look at that friction, again, you start to see the pattern of survival, growth, financing, capacity, market access. Those are all big linchpins. This is also one of my favorite slides. Women in Canada are just as likely as men to launch businesses out of necessity, meaning the proportion of early stage entrepreneurship, so people who launch their business due to a lack of other opportunities. So again, like this data and these stories are so rich. When you think back to the slide where I was telling you about where women have sort of gotten to parity but sort of cycled back, what's interesting is you're going to start to see that sometimes even when women reach sort of representation parity in those places, in healthcare, in professional services, in education, in the arts, and they start to face hurdles in getting paid equally as their male counterparts, they say there's a flux of women that leave those industries and start up businesses in those industries, because they would much rather be in control of their own destiny. Now, that being said, they still face the same hurdles in very different forms. And that's why it was important at the top to show you how that ecosystem sort of works, because the barriers are there to impede women from progress any which way they go. And so we need to sort of broaden the way that we think about this. The other thing that I wanted to note about this slide is that, like I said, women are more likely to, or just as likely as men, to launch their businesses out of necessity. But what's interesting is that they're also more likely to report a higher fear of failure and less confidence in their skills. That's not because they're inherently less confident, but the risk environment that they are situated in and the lack of sort of tangible support and community and empowerment in that society actually chips away at their confidence and makes them feel like they won't have as much of a shot at success. Very quickly, women-owned businesses are concentrated mostly in Quebec and Ontario, but per capita, you're seeing more in Alberta, in BC, in Yukon. And so it tells us again that ecosystems matter. And then when you look at the gaps, the gender gaps, they're the highest in the prairies and Prince Edward Islands, in New Brunswick. Almost 2/3 of Canada's missing entrepreneurs are in Ontario and Quebec. So that tells us that we need to sort of keep in mind two types of strategies. One is that we need to think about how can we provide more targeted ecosystem fixes where the gap is the widest, but also how do we provide scaling strategies that are actually, meaningful and can actually target the biggest provinces where the absolute number of missing entrepreneurs exist. Now, remember that notion that I was telling you that women are leaving industries where they are reaching representation but aren't necessarily getting to equal. This is what drives it home. And so when we looked at women in management, we saw that women tend to be better represented, like I said, in those specialized people-facing, service-oriented sectors. Almost 60% of majority women-owned businesses are concentrated in healthcare, in professional services, and in retail.
That's not accidental, and it's not random. Those sectors are usually where entry barriers are the lowest. The startup costs are usually smaller. Business models can sometimes sort of be built or easier, or lend themselves easier to sort of pre-existing skills, credentials, or community models and demand. They're also the sectors that are more compatible in many cases with sort of care responsibilities and flexible scheduling, not because women prefer them in some abstract sense, but because other sectors are far less accommodating. So that's something also that we need to sort of pause at. Men-owned, majority male-owned businesses, by contrast, are much more diversified across industries. They're much more present in capital-intensive sectors like construction, manufacturing. Again, none of this should be shocking. We see it in our everyday lives, but when you see it in the data, it's really hard to escape. It also is important for us to keep in mind that they are the sectors where the profit margins are also higher, right? So it goes back to, again, that like, when there is a tax on your gender or what you look like or your race or your geography, that trickles down into every single life decision you make, right? And in an economy like this, we just can't afford to keep people out as much as we are. So here's another sort of stark vantage point. On average, women-owned businesses are only about 17% across industries. So majority male businesses take up the remaining portion. So they have the farthest to go in construction, mining, oil and gas, and transportation. And again, I really, really cringe when I hear this. This is not about asking women to lean in. I really don't like that term, because it's about asking those sectors and those systems around them to stop leaning out women through culture, through procurement practices, through network exclusion, financing norms. Like, we need to really be rethinking about a lot of these things. So as we look, for me, one of the other things that I want you to keep in mind is that concentration is not a neutral outcome. Just because we see people represented in a particular industry or in a particular field, it's not always a random thing. And it reflects a lot of sort of systemic and ecosystem interactions that we sometimes don't even take stock of. How much access to capital, access to networks, access to places like this and events like this where you can see yourself represented, safety norms, credibility. Women are building where the system is least hostile to them, and men are building where the system is most open to them. And that needs to, again, change and shift. I do have sort of some policy recommendations, but those are available in the report. And so I'm just going to close by saying, let me end sort of where I began and say, this is not about fixing women. Women are already building. The data shows that. The problem is that the system is still deciding who gets to get into the room and how valued they are. And so every time a woman with a viable idea walks away because the hurdles are too high, because they're not being backed, Canada gets smaller. We don't get bigger. And so when we back women, we back them with real capital, not sort of notional, nice words. We back them with real networks. We give them, right? We give them for as much as they give, right? It's social infrastructure. We're really expanding our own individual potential and our country's growth even further. With that being said, thank you so much for your time, for allowing me to sort of dump all of this data on your brains. I hope that you're not discouraged, but I hope that you're empowered to take this data and to say, no, I'm not just imagining this based on my individual reality, but that this is what the data is telling us. And so I hope that it was informative, and thank you so much for giving me the honor and the time and your attention.
So thank you, Mara, for sharing those insights and helping ground today's conversation in data and research and the broader economic perspective. We are going to continue the conversation with our panel, which has been made possible today from our friends at OPG, Hatch, and NPEI. Our next speaker represents an organization working directly on the ground to create opportunity and remove barriers to employment and economic participation. Please join me in welcoming Shane Altenstand, I hope I said that right correctly, from FedCap Canada to the stage.
Okay, oh, wow, lights are very bright. It's not lost on me that I'm the first gentleman to take the stage today. It's not lost on me that I'm the first person to take the stage after the keynote speaker. It never has been more important to stick to the script, Shane, so I will do that. At FedCap Canada, our network of Employment Ontario service providers, some of which are in the room today, serve job seekers from all walks. But today, we're taking a moment to celebrate women. As we celebrate International Women's Day, it's a great opportunity to recognize the incredible women in this room and the women who help lead and shape FedCap every day across our executive teams, across our front lines, here in Canada, and throughout our global operations. In this video, women from across FedCap globally share how those who came before them helped pave the way and how they continue that tradition through the idea of giving to gain. So let's take a look.
Today is about celebrating women's achievements.
It's rare to have so many female exec leaders, and I'm grateful that I get to work alongside them every day.
One thing that I've gained from the women that I've worked with is the power of not feeling alone.
I've gained perspective through mentorship and learned to embrace new perspective and educate, not train.
I give to gain by giving my colleagues understanding that their voices will be heard.
Giving visibility to the wonderful women that work at FedCap.
The confidence to lead with empathy.
The next generation of young women.
Happy International Women's Day.
Next generation also includes my little 6-year-old daughter, and she drew this Pikachu that she wanted me to show everyone. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. And on behalf of FedCap Canada, and if I may be so bold to say on behalf of all the men in the room, thank you to the GNCC for this amazing work and event that you've put on. Happy International Women's Day and happy Friday.
Thank you, Shane. We are soon going to be moving into the panel portion of the day. Just a couple of housekeeping notes as we move along. You know, we've waited to have the mic for so long that we sometimes go over. So, knowing that, we also know that people have many commitments. We are to go to 2:30, but if you need to sneak out, we will keep the doors open over here. But we ask you to do that quietly. But we hope that you stay around with us. Before we start the panel, I am going to ask something, though. I'm going to ask everybody who owns a business, has shares in talking about entrepreneurships, so owns their own business, has shares in a business here, to stand up for a moment. If you're able to stand up, if not, then put up your hand. So if you are a business owner, yes, please, I ask you to stand up. As you look at the data that Marwa was talking about, now I'm going to ask you another question. Stay standing for a moment, if you're able to. If you had the resources and you could own your own business, I'm going to ask you to stand up. If you are like, if I knew what I was doing, I want you to join those people. And if you would love to, either side business or full-time business, that you would love to do that on your own. So I also want you to look at the women who own their business and those that are standing and connect. Talk about it. Let's figure this out and make that data different. So thank you for standing up, and please join me as I move over to this side of the panel. Okay, everyone can hear? Perfect. Doesn't matter how tall you are now, it's perfect. Okay, so as we move into the end portion of today's celebration, I would like to introduce our panel. Marwa Abdou, who we just heard speak, the Senior Research Director for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Colleen Falco, who is the Vice President of Human Resources with Niagara Casinos, and thank you for hosting us today.
Our pleasure.
And Cheryl Sutherland, who is the founder of Please Notes and was right beside us as we were today. So yes, go check out her booth. It's amazing, amazing products. So for Marwa, we're going to get you to start us off. In your research, including barely breaking ground on women entrepreneurs, Canada's biggest missed business opportunity, what is the single biggest opportunity Canada is still under leveraging when it comes to women-led growth?
Women. I mean, I don't want to take too much time. I feel like I provided the data, but women, we still haven't fully maximized the diversity of our potential. You think about women across different demographies, races, age groups, geographies, industries. We're not less educated. We're more educated than ever. We have the talent, we have the skills. So women.
Right, absolutely. And what, as you were speaking, one of the other things that really was coming to me is, and I do some work in future of work, and we talk about AI, who has not been at a conference where AI comes up. But one of the biggest concerns is actually women are going to be impacted by AI more so than men will be.
Because think of who's creating the technologies and who's determining the biases that are embedded in those technologies.
Yes. Well, and on top of that, and you look at some of the industries. So I was working with a particular college in Canada and asked them how they were preparing administrative assistants with AI, and they looked at me like I had two heads. I was thinking, well, that's terrifying. So, but these are the kind of things. But then we start seeing people going off on their own and actually embracing that and creating a whole new type of administrative assistant. So when we start looking at some of those industries, that also worries me about your data a little bit about what we're going to see. For Cheryl, from your lived experience building Please Notes, which is amazing, does that, from your lived experience building Please Notes, does the opportunity resonate? Where have you personally felt the system either supported you or fell short?
That's kind of a loaded question, friend. So for those who know me, I originally started this company in Southern California, which makes sense. It's very California coded with all the affirmations and such. However, the thing that I noticed is that there was more opportunities for me, not only as a woman, but also as a woman of color, to be able to accelerate my business. Coming back home to Canada, even like there was a CBC interview that I was in where it clearly stated that, oh, we're doing so much to support Black women in entrepreneurship. But when I'm looking at this loan application versus the loan application for just regular entrepreneurs or for being a woman, there's two different standards. Like, I'm not too sure why you need to know my sexual orientation. I don't know why you need to know things like how much assets I have when a lot of these other applications don't ask for those things. You don't need to really know more about my why behind my company versus what is the output I'm able to create? What is the impact I'm able to create? What is the financial viability of my company? And that's where I find that there's a lot of friction, especially for myself, building a product-based business.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And it's so discouraging to hear it. And those are when we start talking about the systems, right? So who do we need to say to in these systems that change that, right? Like who is it that we say, stop asking these questions in this particular grant, like make this more, like make it more even, that it is not, I don't have to jump through other hoops, right? Going back to Marwa for a moment, from a data perspective, where are women entrepreneurs most constrained right now? Do you feel capital, networks, procurement, policy? I have a feeling you may say all.
Yeah, it is all. I would say capital because women still receive a significantly smaller share of sort of growth financing than any other population. Networks, because opportunities like customers, like investors, mentors, those flow through informal circles for many women. And so risk because I think women statistically start out with less financial cushion to take risks. So yeah, I'd say all.
Yeah. I'm going to you, Colleen. Niagara casinos invest significantly in their people and the community. Thank you. How does fostering a strong internal culture and encouraging community involvement strengthen your organization and the experience that you create for your teams?
Well, it's a loaded question because culture is everything. I think for any corporation, it doesn't matter whether you're in public service, not for profit, you know, what you create as a workplace, that is the biggest lever for you. I mean, everybody has a product or service. You know, in our industry, we're in the gaming industry, we have slot machines, so does our competition, but our team makes the difference. So when the team makes the difference, when the team buys in, that is critical. With our culture, we have 4 values that were developed, not by the executive, not by some board, they were developed by our team members. And of those 4 values, one of them is improving our community. That is powerful. That is really powerful because we use our NC community program not just to give back to the community, which is critical for us. I mean, we're in the gaming business. We actually our sole purpose is to generate money for the province, and we do that, and that gives us purpose. But the meaningful connections really come from the grassroots efforts of our teams. They actually take the time to create dart tournaments and cornhole tournaments and support the causes that are important to them, whether it's Jillian's Place or Habitat for Humanity. We use a lot of our community opportunities, not just to provide a check, we do that, and we use it as opportunities to do team building, to strengthen the skills of the team. We use Leadership Niagara to develop our leaders and our potential leaders. Those partnerships are really, really critical. It's the collaboration. It goes back to that concept of give to gain. We're constantly giving through volunteerism of our team, through our ability to reach out and make partnerships that are mutually beneficial, whether it's with Niagara College or Brock or Workforce Collective. We're also looking for opportunities to develop board leadership, and some of those opportunities to be out in the community, but we gain from that.
I'm going to go off script here for a minute and ask a question. Is there something that you can think of that you've done as a large organization that has helped women in your organization be able to thrive?
I think so. We have an NC Women program. Now, it's been something that was very, very strong pre-COVID. Less, I would say, visible, but still very powerful because we have this amazing group of women. There's 50 strong, not only women from our team here today, but also the men who support. And I think it's important to include men in the conversation because without sponsorship and champions who will support our careers, who will support our efforts, without the support of our president saying absolutely, there are systemic biases that we need to work through. And what are our stats? How do we compare? How many women are in leadership positions? How do we fare against those statistics? And those are conversations that we had. And ironically, this morning, unprompted, we were having a conversation about strategy and how important it is to embed very thoughtful, meaningful strategies and having the time for that when you are in firefighting mode in businesses that are still, I would say, we are still recovering from all of the economic drivers that I was speaking about. There are so many impacts, and it's making sure that you are leading with intention. And I think that makes all the difference.
Right, thank you. I'm going to pick up on 2 pieces there. Is one, if we talk about some things that were happening before COVID, and I think sometimes we jumped back into life and we forget some of the things we learned, but also some of the trajectories we were on and thinking about what was actually working well before we were here 6 years ago. So I think that that's something for all of us to kind of think a little bit about. And I'm gonna, my son is gonna love me for this. To your point of sponsors, and my 16-year-old son is here today. He's doing our co-op with us at the apiary. And it's so important because, as a male, it is important to have the conversation. It's not a female issue. This is a conversation about humanity and the world that we live in, and it requires everybody. So, sorry, Matthew, you knew I was going to say something about you here. Cheryl, I'm going to go to you, and I want to ask you about community and how important has been to your growth, and then what roles did networks and mentors and customers play in your momentum?
I feel very lucky because all of my customers, I don't even call them customers, clients, besties, they love me. They love my products. They're very empathetic, and I think that goes hand in hand with having a personal growth business. And one of the things that I realized, because I'm not originally from Ontario, sorry, I'm originally from Calgary. However, one of the things that I know that I would not be here and be able to have this company for 10 years if it wasn't for people saying my names in rooms that I was not in. Not for people like advocating for me to be on panels or to lead a workshop. Or I even remember my first speaking gig, somebody was like, I think Cheryl would be great for this. So that is a huge component of it. And I want to say that usually it's people that are in the same positions as I am that are advocating for me. So I would love to say, what would the difference be if I had more people in positions of power, whether they be male, whether they be white, whether they be working in different organizations, different levels of government, saying, hey, why don't we take a look at this business or these people, or how do we support them in the ways that make sense for them? There's an amazing person who I love, Ernesto Ciroli. I don't know if you've heard of him. Yes. So he's very much like, you need to speak to the people to find out what they need in order to support them in the way that serves them best, instead of just attempting to give them things and hoping that it makes a difference. So I even, like, in listening to some of the data today, was thinking about all the different ways that I've heard different women entrepreneurs talk about how supportive that life has been for them based on their own circumstances. One of my favorite people, Sheena Brady from Tease Tea, if you've ever heard of Tease Tea, she often speaks about the reason that she was able to get so far in her business is because, like, some of the loans that she's applying for, the grants she's applying for, she's like, I have no idea what this is, but my husband's a lawyer, or my brother's able to look over this legal documentation and fill out some of these applications for me. But if people don't have those circumstances in place, if they don't have those support systems, then how are they going to be able to do the same things that I'm able to do? So not only, again, supporting people with the resources that you have, the networks that you have, but then also being willing to stand up and support them as well, not only with the finances, but then also just by being a good friend.
Absolutely. I love what you said about, people that speak your name when you're not in the room. And I think that is so big for networks and community building. And I think it's a really great point for people to leave with, think about, we talked about some action that you can take here today is, the people that you would advocate for, speak their name in the rooms that they're not in. That's great advice. Thank you. Marwa, going back to you. So based on your research into philanthropy and inclusive growth, how does corporate giving or community investment contribute to long-term economic resilience?
Yeah, I mean, again, succinctly, because I am much more interested in what my co-panelists have to say, and I feel like I've taken up enough space with the keynote. But the way that I think about it, and for me, International Women's Day is sort of like what I like to do on my birthday, which is super nerdy. It's a way to take stock of what we have done over the past year and what we want to do differently going forward. And I think when I think about corporate investment, corporate philanthropy, that notion, it's not charity. It is absolutely you signaling, or in any organization. I don't even think it's about corporations. I think in any organizations, when you're situated in a community, I mean, not to plug the podcast again, but one of the upcoming episode is all about growth and I talk about you know, my guests, we talk about how growth is often concentrated in these massive metropolitan areas, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, but then Canada is a vast geography. And so when you think about how do you invest in communities, how do you invest in networks, how do you actually signal to your communities where you're located that you're invested in social infrastructure? That's huge. That's not just, I want to take from you. That's saying, I want to invest in your economic potential as a community, because we all benefit from that. So I think it is about that sort of circular mindset. And it shouldn't be in that sort of philanthropic framing. And so I think you're investing in long-term economic infrastructure. And the reason why we live in such a divisive world that we live in is because everybody's looking to their little part of the pie. But the reality is, and I hope that that's what you all took from the data, is that if we just expand the lens a little bit more, if we look right and left and look at who's being left out, we realize, oh, actually, you have this skill set and I would really benefit from that. You bring this experience, you have this language skill, you have this ability to reach this market. There's so much within our reach, within our diversity. We have one of the most educated, diverse populations in the entire world. And yet we're still thinking in very linear ways. And I think we need to break out of that thinking into the giving mindset instead of the taking.
I laugh sometimes at the apiary. I'll meet with a woman who, you know, something has happened in her life and she'll talk to me. I'm like, I feel like I'm the entrepreneurship whisperer. I'm like, tell me your skills and I'll tell you what business you can build with this. But the other thing I was going to say is when we built there, and this is as a small business, kind of on the outskirts of downtown St. Catharines, and for the community that we lived in, like we bought an old building and, you know, made it pretty and all this. The community started knocking on our door and saying thank you. You know, we're helping, you know, and it's not something that was intentional. But I also thought that was really interesting, is that people were saying thank you for bringing this to downtown. Thank you for, and you know, as much as I appreciate the thank you, it wasn't intentional. But now, if I look to scale, it's something that I would intentionally do, is to bring it into communities and neighborhoods that need that bit of hope. I'm going to go to you, Colleen, again, and going to that, you know, corporate standpoint of give to gain leadership. What does that look like beyond sponsorship or check writing? What does that look like for you?
I think it's intentional design. I think it's making sure that you are embedding in your strategy, your strategic planning, your initiatives and projects, that community mindset, and looking for where you are a good fit. We are a key partner in the Niagara region. We do a lot of destination marketing. We do a lot of, you know, bringing and driving tourism. But at the same time, we are part of a community, and that's not lost on us. And whether it's the Niagara South Hospital, or whether it's, you know, working with a company like Ready, Willing, Able, where we're, you know, working collaboratively to ask, you know, what do you need? How can we help? And listening to that answer and trying to find ways that we have mutually beneficial opportunities. And we do. For every opportunity that we are working with a partner, we have either leaders who are stepping up and providing guidance. And that really goes back to what Cheryl was talking about. If you had ready access to mentors and individuals from a corporate standpoint who might be able to help you fill in the applications, if you don't have a husband, brother, you know, whoever that might be, you have people in the community who are in big business, who deal with certain things every day, who can sit on either boards or mentorships or associations like JNCC, and making sure you're getting out there networking. For us, it's making sure that we are seeding our team where we can be of most help, but also we take a lot of our feedback from our own team. What's important to them? What causes are important to them? What do they want us to support? So whether it's unhoused, underemployed, individuals who are challenged, whether it's Paston, whether it's Jillian's Place, we are out in full force in the community, not just writing checks, fundraising, grassroots, our team collectively, which gives them social connections, which builds engagement, which builds opportunities for networking, cross-departmental collaboration, which builds pride in the workplace. we all succeed. And as we focus as leaders on our teams and making sure that they're growing and thriving and getting those opportunities, maybe it's not always a upwards, trajectory, but they're getting job expansion or they're getting opportunities to support a not-for-profit through, Leadership Niagara, whatever it might be, helping them to do that and asking what's important to you, how can we support you? That makes the difference.
Right. It reminds me a bit of like an entrepreneurial mindset as well, right? So, really giving that opportunity to make their career their own, but also give back in a way that they feel is intrinsic to what they find important. So that's amazing. So as we move into the last few minutes, I'm going to go to all. This is rapid fire. One of my things for 2026 has been quantum leaps. So I'm going to ask you, if everyone here committed to one action, I'm going to ask you for a quantum leap, in the next 90 days to live out, give to gain, what would your action be?
Ask Colleen to seed my company.
That is amazing quantum leap.
I am here. See, this is what we have to do: is ask for what we want and be willing to receive.
Right.
Thank you,
Yes.
I mean, we already knew Colleen was going to be amazing when we saw those shoes, so now we're all besties. But no, I think for me, one of the big things is just being more willing to ask, but then also holding people accountable. Like there was this gorgeous lady that I met here this morning. I don't see you because again, these lights are very, very bright, but if you want to throw up your hands, she has an amazing book that she's putting out and she's so excited about it. However, she's been very hesitant to actually put it out there. So we had this conversation about, okay, well, let's set a date. Like, what is the timeline? Like, you're going to call me. We're going to put this in your calendar right now to when you are going to have this release on Amazon, because I believe that you deserve your goals and your dreams. And so I'm very excited for her book to come out. It's for nurses. And she has a lovely table back there. So please go see her purple table. I will flag you towards her table when I see you later on. But these are the things that we get to do for each other to make sure that we're all successful, that we're all rising and doing great things.
For myself, I would say just go deep. So one person. If you could reach out to one person, just one. Not Cheryl, because she's mine.
Oh, sorry guys.
But one person or one organization or one business or one not-for-profit, doesn't matter what it is, dig deep, ask, how can I help? What keeps you up at night? What are your challenges that we might be able to support? I want you to look around the room. If everybody did that with just one person, what is that multiplier effect? What is that power? What is that potential economic, spin-off that you could get from that just by simply sharing your time, your attention, and connecting people? You might not be the one that can help, but you might know somebody who can.
I'm going to do something combined with both of you because you just set me up perfectly, but get some skin in the game, right? We can't get what we can't give. And, when I was a kid and my parents would always sort of on a yearly basis, would be like, okay, it's time to give to charity. And I'd be like, well, can I give some money from my piggy bank? I don't want to give any of my toys away. And my dad is like, what's your stake in the game? And it's like, you have to give something in order to feel that benefit. And so expand the economic doorway that you extend to others. And it could be something that is not monetary. Mentorship. You can review someone's procurement documents. You can help somebody with their loan application. You can share your industry experience. If you work for a corporation, consider thinking about, okay, how do I expand access to somebody who hasn't had that accessibility, right? So again, break out of your silos and get into the game.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I hope that there is something in the last couple of minutes that you are going to be able to take with you. I have one last question for all panelists, which is one lesson that you've learned, that's it, just one, that you have learned the hard way that you would want an emerging leader, entrepreneur, to understand earlier. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to say cash flow. Anybody in a business, cash flow. I'm going to go over to you, Cheryl.
I would say be clear on your vision. So when I was building my business, I always knew it was going to be a multi-million-dollar business. And so I made sure that I had the right people, places, and things in place, but also more importantly, getting all of my agreements in black and white. I love my friends, and a lot of friends that I have are in this space as well. However, unless I have a contract, that's when our friendship gets tricky. So please make sure you have those, because again, it's very convoluted when it comes time to start getting money from people, and that's not in pen and paper.
I think for me, it's a little bit different. I would say, don't be afraid of failure. We have a lot of young professionals, emerging leaders in the room today. Shout out to Hatch and my daughter's table there. Don't be afraid to try and fail, because you are going to learn more through discomfort and those uncomfortable moments than you ever will if you're always perfect and always successful. So don't be afraid of it. You grow in those moments, and you're not in it alone. Never, ever be afraid to reach out to a colleague, a leader, a mentor, a friend. Join associations, as I said before. There's always somebody there to support you.
Get into as many rooms as possible that are going to stretch you and that are going to sort of hold the mirror up and make you go like, ooh, I got some work to do. That's been sort of where I've learned. I mean, I'm not an entrepreneur, but when we talk about resilience, resilience is also built. And the only way you can build it is by taking risks and stepping into unknowns. So get uncomfortable.
Perfect. Thank you. All great advice. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their insights and their experiences today. Thank you so much. You can just stay up here I'm just going to wrap up from here. I'm not going back over to the podium. So we're just waiting for a silent auction to be put up onto the screens. But so I do have a couple of last remarks. So as we wrap up this incredible International Women's Day, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you again to our panelists, to Marwa for your keynote. The data speaks volumes about where we need to go. And I really, I know that oftentimes in today's world also, we talk about where's the data, and you literally just gave us the data.
Just don't hate me for it.
Yeah. And of course, each and every one of you for coming. I know that it is a lot to take Friday out of your busy schedules with everything that you juggle. So thank you for investing the time in you, for those that invested the time in their teams to come. We've heard a lot of people. I heard somebody say earlier how amazing it is to see how many young women are in this room, which I absolutely love as well. So thank you for being a part of this important conversation. Yes, absolutely. And a final thank you as well to your TV, who are recording today's event so that the conversation can continue beyond this room. Before, this is not on script, but I can't see great, but I want to see if Ruth Unra is still around, and I want to say thank you to Ruth, who started much of this conversations around International Women's Day. You could tell her I gave her a shout out. Then I just brought attention to the fact that she was no longer here. And I hope that as you leave today, that you carry forward a conversation, a fresh perspective, an idea that you can put into action. If you have ideas, come to me. I love ideas. I'm an idea. I'm sure lots of entrepreneurs are the idea people. So bring us your ideas. And I want to thank you for being part of today's event. Before we wrap up, we've got some instructions for silent auction. So if you're bidding on a silent auction item, check the screens when they come up. Ta-da! It's just like this. To see if you were the successful bidder. And thank you for everybody who did bid and participate in that. Then go to the silent auction area where this item is then you can take the item and the bid sheet to the payment station, which is located at the back of the room. On a final note, I have two other things. Tomorrow there is a march. Equal Voice Niagara is hosting an International Women's Day March at the Niagara Region headquarters in Thorold. It is free. It is open to anybody. If you would like to continue the momentum for today, everyone is welcome to attend. You might need a poncho or an umbrella, but it's gonna be nice as far as like warmer weather. Also, I just wanted to say that on the 17th of March, there is Show Her the Money, which is being done by Innovate Niagara, and is Win is a supporter of this. And there is a showing in downtown St. Catharines at the Performing Arts Center, and go out to that as well. Have a green beer and show up there. And so thank you. Happy International Women's Day. Have a wonderful weekend. And be safe and enjoy is celebrating you and all that you accomplish.
Thank you to Kara.
Thank you. Thank you.
I met a boy last week trying to run that game. Made it sound so sweet when he say my name. I said, boy, stop, run it back. You can talk that talk, but can you play that sax? To the boss last night, buying out the boss. Said I can ride top down in his Jaguar. I'm like, boy, stop, run that back. You can drive all night, but can you play that sax? Baby, baby, I've been waiting for no one to blow my mind. Baby, maybe you can get it if you got that thing I like. I need a stand up, with the change round, so the type of red hot love that got me freezing. 'Cause say you can go on, not the way you lay that check. But if you wanna hear me sing, you better play that sax. Give it to me. You better play that sax. Okay. Last week, honey, he's so vain. Yeah, he been loving himself more than Kim and yeah. I'm like, boy, stop, run that back. Goddamn you, father, can you play that sax?